We won't even notice it, probably.
Well, we're all here. We're all together. So we'll begin with just a little bit of purification. So take a moment, maybe close your eyes if you'd like. This is a great chance to decompress from just whatever you've got going on in your life. And it's not just negativity. Certainly there's challenges we face that are difficult, but there's a lot of things that are exciting that we're looking forward to, or planning trips or vacations, and that can make the mind busy. And so it's helpful to just take a look at all the things you're carrying in the mind and see what you can put down in a skillful way, just so you can work on yourself for the next hour and a half with no entanglements from outside thoughts. And then it's helpful to look for any of the afflictive types of emotions that might interfere with meditation and Dhamma practice, which are usually some derivative form of greed or craving, some derivative form of aversion or ill will or anger, and then some derivative form of delusion in which we're just sort of in denial or not wanting to look at things as they really are. So these are helpful things to contemplate and to let those afflictive emotions go and just open yourself up, purify to be ready for this meditation and teaching. So with that, I'll sound the bell. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Great to see everybody. So we'll go into our meditation. So feel free to do whatever you need to do to get ready. I put out, just in case anybody's interested, a couple of Seiza benches, which people can use to meditate on. They're surprisingly comfortable. Meg, if any of you know her, she uses one of those. It's her favorite thing to do. Favorite thing, I mean, in terms of how to do meditation. And then I also just put out a couple of big cushions with zafus on them. So help yourself. And you can certainly, modify these things too.
I want to see what this is like.
Yeah, absolutely. You will want to turn it so it's facing that way. Usually the easiest way to do it is to pick up the bench and then kneel on the pad. So I folded up a yoga mat there so it gives you a little extra cushioning on the knee. And then, you just sort of play with the bench a little bit until it feels like it's about right under your sit bones. So,
Is that comfortable?
We'll see.
Yeah, probably comfortable now, but
Do you put your knees on the bump there or not?
it's all still the same amount of padding. It's just a tripled up yoga pad in that spot. But so if because that's new for you, if you get 5 minutes into the practice and it seems like not a good idea, then feel free to move. You're not locked in there.
You've got it ready here.
Yeah, right. You're not locked into that space. So.
There you go.
I would be done already.
All right. Well, before we start the actual meditation, let's just check in with the body, look for a little symmetry, however it is you're sitting or laying. So you're just looking to make sure that there's not extra muscle tension on one side of the body or the other, but so that things are relatively balanced out. If you're sitting in a chair and your feet are flexed, if it's a little high for you, you can always grab one of those bolsters or a yoga mat out of the closet to put your feet on. You might find that helps. Place your hands in a way that is comfortable. And if we're sitting, we want to keep our backs relatively straight, but not stiff or rigid. Sometimes I use the image of if there was a reed in a lake, and the roots of the reed were planted in the white, soft sand, and then the reed extends up through the water to the surface. And so the reed is straight, but at the same time it's got a flexibility to it and a fluidity to it. So I think it might be helpful to think of the spine in that way. Vertical and upright, but not stiff. And then you can let your chin tuck downward just a tiny bit. That takes pressure off the spine and off the back of the neck. Let the eyes close softly to eliminate the visual distractions. And let the breath come and go through the nose however it wants to. And with that, I'm going to sound the bell and I'll begin the meditation practice. Just let yourself follow the sound of the bell as it fades into silence. And that silence, that emptiness of sound, is an invitation to turn your senses inward, to see what's happening inside. And it's a reminder to let go of the habit of the mind, which is to be projected outward most of the time, curious and engaged in the outside world. And for now, just focus on the feeling of inner being, the feeling of being present in your own body, the feeling of sitting or laying, just being present. You'll notice that there's a quality of stability in your body. There's a quality of natural peacefulness and balance. And so we turn the senses inward and we come to this awareness of the body as a place of refuge, a very peaceful place for us to dwell. And so with that feeling of presence and awareness established in the body, let's bring the awareness up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. And simply open up your awareness to any of the physical sensations that are occurring anywhere within the scalp. So there's this movement of awareness, this opening, and this waiting. Paying attention, being patient, and just observing and seeing what comes up. And sometimes there won't be a whole lot of sensation to be noticed, but other times there's sensation in the form of temperature. You feel warm or cool in the room. Sometimes temperature, you can tell that it is maybe warmth from inside the body versus the warmth in the atmosphere of the room. Sometimes there's a little air movement in the room. Other times there's sensations on the surface of the skin. You might get a little tickle or an itch or a pulsation. Or sometimes there's just a feeling of very subtle vibration, kind of the energy of being alive. So we just observe. And as we observe these sensations, we don't need to evaluate them as to whether they're desirable or undesirable or good or bad. We just observe each of them with equal interest. And we watch as they come and go. And sometimes within those sensations, we'll discover that there is tension located somewhere in the body, in this case the scalp. And it's very common to find tension in the scalp. And so what we do in that case is simply release it. We just give it permission to leave the body, unconditional permission, and we let the tension leave the scalp. And the tension is something added on to our natural, peaceful, relaxed state, so it's not needed at this time. And so that's why we let it go. We don't look at it as an enemy or a problem. It's just something else that we don't need at this time. Now from the scalp we can move our awareness downward, and as we do, see if you can feel the flow of awareness moving from the scalp downward into the forehead, downward into the temples. We'll also move the awareness down through the eyebrows and into the eyes. And here again we'll just be patient and observe and pay attention to whatever sensations come up. Temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin. And sometimes you'll notice that those sensations just kind of arise and pass away. No sensation really stays the same for very long before changing into something else or fading away. So we can observe the impermanent nature of the sensations of the body. And again, look for tension anywhere it might be and release it with a gladness of heart, a real gentleness and compassion. We are not angry at the tension, we just notice it and let it go. And let it go with real kindness. So your forehead, your brow might be furrowed, or the temples might be tight, or some people find they might be squinting. So we let all that go. And then in the absence of the tension, once we've let the tension go, we can just continue to feel whatever sensations are there in these parts of the body. So now, from the temples, we can begin to move the awareness downward into the ears. And again, see if you can actually feel that flow of awareness as it moves. That helps to increase the ability of the mind to focus on sensation. And let the awareness flow from the ears forward into the cheekbones. Start to feel it moving through the face. And you can observe the awareness drifting down from the eyes now, passing through the nose, all the way down to the lips and mouth and chin. And just be with the sensations, temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin. You're with all of these sensations objectively. Any tension you notice, just let go. So your jaws, your teeth might be clenched, your lips might be pursed. Let the tension go. Maintain awareness of the sensations. And with each successive step of this practice, we start to feel just a little more peaceful, stable, and grounded. So moving from the chin now, we can lower the awareness down to the neck, to the throat and the front of the neck, and explore the sensations there. And then move the awareness to the sides of the neck and the back. Let go of any tension anywhere in the neck. And then move the awareness downward into the shoulders, observing the sensations. Now here in the shoulders, you might notice a sensation of contact between your shoulders and the chair or the cushion on the floor. Sometimes you'll notice a sensation of contact between your skin and your clothing. So again, just sensations to be observed. And if there's tension, we release it. We let the shoulders drop if they're shrugged. And then from the shoulders, we can move the awareness downward into the upper arms. And again, see if you can feel that movement of awareness, that very subtle flow of awareness as it moves down into the arms. You can observe the front part of the arms, the biceps, the sensations there, and just immediately upon moving to that spot, you can release the tension. And then we can rotate awareness inward to the inside part of the upper arm. And again, in the same way, we can observe the sensations and release tension almost simultaneously. Rotating to the back part of the upper arms, repeating the process. And then moving to the outside part of the upper arms. From the shoulders all the way down to the elbow joints, just observing, letting go, becoming more peaceful, stable, quiet in your own body. Let your awareness begin to flow down through your elbow joints and feel it as it moves slowly through the forearms, travels down the arms toward the wrists, all the while experiencing the sensations, letting the tension go, and then moving into the wrists. From the wrists, moving awareness down into the hands. And each part of the hands has different sensations. The heels of the hands we can observe. Then the palms of the hands. We can move around to the top and observe sensations on the tops of the hands. And finally the fingers, the thumbs, the fingertips. And then we bring awareness to rest for a moment in the fingernails. And here's an interesting opportunity to just be patient with awareness and focus on the fingernails. And just see if any sensation comes up. And do that without desiring sensation. So you're not creating craving, but you're just patiently observing and seeing, is there anything here to be noticed? And if there is, great. If there's not, perfectly fine. But we just observe. Now from the tips of the fingers and the fingernails, we'll make the move up to the top of the chest. So it's helpful to maintain an attitude of continuity of mindfulness. Bringing awareness up to the collarbones and then letting it drift downward through the collarbones. Just feel it moving through the chest, downward, all the way down to the base of the sternum and then outward through the rib cage. And just observe those sensations. Sometimes parts of the rib cage or the chest might be a little less sensitive than other areas, so maintain that awareness, that quality of attentive awareness. Really be curious about the sensations in the body. Let the tension go. And then we can move awareness to the underarms and feel as that awareness drifts downward from the underarms into the waist. And then moving from the waist forward into the belly. And here in the belly, just observe Observe the rising and falling with each breath and the sensations associated with that. Feeling of expansion and contraction, feeling of contact between your skin and clothing. And if there's any tension in the belly, just let that go. It's one of the places that so many of us hold tension habitually. So it's helpful to see that. Just let it go. Soften the tummy. And then from the belly, we can bring our awareness around to the top of the back. So again, maintain this attitude of continuity of awareness. So we're not breaking the awareness, but we move to the top of the back at the base of the neck. And we let the awareness drift downward a bit through the shoulder blades, through the upper third of the back, noticing those sensations. Again, here there might be contact between your back and the surface that you're leaning against. And then letting the awareness to drop further to the middle third of the back. Remaining objective with the sensations and just releasing tension as you encounter it. Moving downward further still into the lower back, observing and releasing. And sometimes people notice that if they have sensations in the body that are maybe unpleasant or painful or difficult, that it can be hard to be objective about those sensations. Because nobody likes pain, nobody wants to experience it. So objectivity can be difficult. It can also be difficult to release tension. So it can be helpful to become aware of the great expansiveness of your own awareness. That your awareness is not trapped in one tiny part of your body or the universe, but your awareness is expansive. And that it is possible to allow as much space as these difficult sensations need to be just as they are, and at the same time you don't need to react to them. So it's just a peaceful coexistence. The sensations of the back are this way right now. Can I be okay with that? The sensations of the back are this way. Can I be okay? And we just allow it to be okay as it is by not pushing against it with anger or disliking. And we find we can soften the muscles a bit and let the awareness flow. We let it flow from the lower back down into the sit bones. Feel it moving through. Feel it moving through the hips and into the pelvis. And again, we just observe the sensations. This is the way the body feels in this moment, in this place. And if tension is detected, we just set it free. And then from the pelvis, we let the awareness begin to move down through the thighs. And we observe the thighs are larger parts of the body, so we observe the top surface of the thighs first. And we notice the different sensations and let the tension go there. We can rotate outward, observing sensations there. Rotating again to the underside of the thighs, observing, letting go, and then moving to the inside surface of the thighs, from the tops all the way down to the knee joints, just observing and letting go. Allowing everything in this moment to to be just as it is, pushing against nothing, pulling nothing. From the thighs, let the awareness flow downward through the knee joints. Feel that soothing awareness as it moves down into the calves and shins. Feel it moving a bit further down through the ankles. And then finally, awareness begins to move into the feet, where we observe the heels and the sensations of the feet there, and then a little further we move into the balls of the feet. Maybe you detect sensations of contact here, or sometimes moisture, perspiration. Rotating to the tops of the feet, the sensations are usually different. So we notice them, and as always, let any tension go unconditionally. And then we move down into the toes, move a little further into the toenails, and again, just hang out at the toenails for a while, observing. Any sensations in the toenails, just become aware, but don't desire them. Don't get attached to the idea of having them. Just be there and notice what is true. And then we'll let it go. And we'll bring the awareness once again up to the top of the head and the area of the scalp. But this time, at your own pace, you can begin to guide your awareness back down through your body. Try to do it part by part, in about the same order that we do it together. That's just to maintain some continuity and to also just to make sure no part is forgotten. So you can move through. Just with each breath, you can move to a different part. Move through the body, observing those sensations objectively and letting the tension go again wherever you find it. You may discover tension appearing in new places. And often you'll find tension reappearing in places where it was just 5 minutes ago or 2 minutes ago. We have tension in our body as a result of oftentimes just stress and anxiety and worry. We notice the amount of tension we carry in the body when we're just sitting here in meditation and we know that tension is not necessary. So we can see that tension is coming about for a reason. And we can see that even if we release it, it tends to come back. So from this we know that we have a habit energy of creating tension in the body. And we do it in kind of a defensive way to brace ourselves against maybe the emotional suffering we'd experience with a heartbreak, or maybe because of anger that we're experiencing, or maybe we got hollered at by somebody. And so all of these different difficult emotions, they cause us to hold tension in the body. And then the tension in the body kind of echoes the emotions that put them there in the first place. So with this wonderful insight, we can release this tension over and over. And as we do, we can know with wisdom that we are releasing ourselves from this habit energy of holding tension. And it might take a few tries before you start to notice the difference, but releasing tension in this way, noticing habit energies of tension, you begin to set yourself free. And so rather than your first reaction being aversion or anger or fear and tension in the body, your first reaction can just be releasing. Nothing in the world can harm an absolutely non-resistant person. So once you've had your chance to move your awareness through your body and work with your tension, let's all bring the awareness up to the base of the nose. We've got the wonderful little patch of skin beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip. And we can start by focusing awareness there. And then we can spread that awareness a little bit further upward into the rings of the nostrils. And we take it up just a bit further still into the nasal passages. So now if you can picture this triangular area of the nose, we have our awareness focused here. And we become aware of the simple movement of the breath in and out through the nose. So when you're breathing in, you just know you're breathing in. And when you're breathing out, you know that you're breathing out. Which is so different from the way we normally operate. We almost never pay attention. So breathing in, we know we're breathing in. Breathing out, we know we're breathing out. And as you work with the breath, you can stay with it for the full duration. So it's staying with that in-breath as it starts and kind of reaches its fullness. It slows down, pauses momentarily, and it reverses, begins to empty the lungs. The out-breath reaches its full intensity before it slows and pauses and becomes the in-breath. So this is the movement of the breath and the awareness of the breath for its full duration. And sometimes when we do that, we'll notice that one breath might be a little longer or shorter than another, just occurring naturally. Sometimes you might notice that there's more air moving through the left nostril or more air moving through the right nostril. Just bringing all of your awareness to this triangular area of the nose. And as you observe the movement, somewhere within that triangular area of the nose, there is the feeling of touch. The feeling of touch as the breath moves through. Feeling of touch as the breath moves in and as the breath moves out. And if you become curious about that feeling of touch and you focus awareness on it, you find that on the in-breath, the feeling of touch is a little different. There's a sensation of dryness relative to the out-breath, where there is a sensation of humidity or moisture. And then breathing in, the air temperature feels cooler than breathing out, where it feels just a little warmer. So we have all these subtleties of the breath, the sensations, the movement of the breath, and we just stay focused here. And from time to time, things will distract us away from observing the breath. Frequently that happens with sounds. We just hear cars on the road, we get distracted. As soon as you notice that, this is actually a very special, very important and wonderful moment, because you've noticed the distraction, so you can guide your awareness back to the triangular area of the nose and reestablish awareness and just focus on it. And you find in doing that, the sounds just take care of themselves, no action required. And sometimes there's sensations in the body that'll pull awareness away. You'll feel maybe a little ache or pain or an itch. It It kind of pulls the awareness away, and again, you notice that. It's a wonderful, important moment because you have noticed a distraction in the mind. And so your response to that is to gently guide it back to the breath. Always be gentle and compassionate. There's never a getting mad about the breath or the mind wandering. It's every time you notice, this is the practice. This is wonderful. And sometimes the mind will just wander off on its own. You'll be thinking about doing something or remembering or planning tonight. And again, you notice that? Wonderful moment. Wonderful moment. Guide the awareness back to the breath. And we just do that over and over. And soon the mind stays focused on the breath for longer and longer periods of time. So just work with the breath in this same way. Focused on the movement and touch and sensations, all within the triangular area of the nose. So let's just sit in silence together for a few minutes, meditating in this way, remaining focused. In just a few minutes, I'll sound the bell to end the meditation practice. take your time coming out of that slowly and gently. Can maintain a degree of mindfulness and a degree of peacefulness as you come out. Feel free to get up and stretch if you want. The tea is, the air pot is full of hot water in the kitchen, and there's all kinds of tea and cups and everything, so help yourself if you're in the mood. Sometimes helps to stay sharp while we're talking, but otherwise, yeah, it's a good, we'll just take a moment here before we continue with the teaching.
Anybody need a handout? Oh. Did you hear last week? I think Norman needs a handout.
Last week, I think Norma and I think Elaine does too, and we
Oh,
just happen
probably.
to have two, so
Okay.
yeah, we're in good shape. Thanks, Cheryl. And these are actually the new ones for this week, so and we'll for sure get into these today. So,
She wasn't here. She was
Oh, wasn't last week?
She's been on.
I gave her one
Oh, you did?
already. Yep,
Oh, sorry.
yep. So I think we're still in good shape.
Thank you.
But
How
it's kind
was
of.
that, kneeling?
A lot better than I was expecting, yeah.
Was it?
Puts the spine in a really nice position.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really does. Yeah, it's like
Thank you.
super easy to be vertical.
Yeah.
Wonder if it would make a difference if
It
you're
was
short,
so uncomfortable,
like
didn't
most
it?
chairs.
Yeah, and well, and of course, each one of these, you know, the height of it and
Yeah.
all might not be exactly right for each person, but yeah, my intention is to make more of them in different sizes so that they would be a little better. Did you feel much like on this part, thank you, Cheryl, like on this part of your ankle from your feet kind of being stretched out, or?
Felt a lot of tightness from the knee up in here.
Yeah. Well,
So maybe a little higher might be better for me. I don't
Sure.
know.
yeah, and you could always accomplish that with just folding a blanket a couple
Yeah.
times and throwing it on there. But yeah, I've really enjoyed those. And my son, he uses those most of the time. And he's going through the Zen priesthood training at the Minnesota Zen Center, and so he's does a lot of practicing, and so that's his favorite
No,
way to go.
they're socks.
Oh, they just blend so well.
So, but that's good. It's nice to have some options.
Yeah.
I think too, you learn to stretch that area too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really tight.
Don't you try it.
I have, but I need something in between my knee. A cushion, like, or a sponge.
But you use one of these to put your feet on so you're not putting. It helps.
No, that doesn't bother me. Thank you.
Oh.
All right. Well, I think we're ready. So we'll continue on, and feel free to turn on lights if anybody wants them on. So last week we were working on Upekkha Parami, which is the last of the 10 perfections. And we were looking at Upekkha. Of course, the definition of that is equanimity. And so we were talking about equanimity in terms of the dictionary definition, which is kind of a feeling of calm and balance and poise, especially when things are particularly hectic or difficult. And so that's definitely true. But that might be the result of equanimity more, the way we practice it in the teaching. So to that dictionary definition, we would add that we are non-attached, we're unattached. So in other words, we're not in a place where we're generating big amounts of craving, big amounts of aversion. And because of this, we're able to be balanced and free. So if you've been in a state where you feel pretty good and pretty calm and pretty balanced, and then some idea occurs to you, I need to do this or I need to do that right now, that equanimity is disrupted to an extent and you feel kind of out of balance. You feel uptight. And so this is an awareness that attachment is the thing that throws the wheel of equanimity out of balance. So when we become attached, we start craving, we start clinging. The offshoots of craving and clinging are like greed, anger, aversion, ill will, hatred, all of those sorts of things. We become aware that when we experience any of those negative emotions, that we no longer feel good. We may think that we're directing negative emotions toward other people who maybe we think deserve it, that we're angry at them. But in fact, what we end up with is just all of that simmering right here inside of us. So equanimity is just a wonderful part of the practice, the 10th parami and the 4th Brahma-vihara, so showing how important it is. And so this is the state that we're always cultivating. So it's this state of non-attachment, detachment, letting go, willingness to let go, but in no way is it I don't care or it doesn't matter. So it's not a disinterest, it's not a closing off, but what it is it's such a balance that you'd really be able to probably talk to two people with very different opposing views, and you could feel equanimous during that conversation without, starting to feel a lot of this feeling of being riled up. So this equanimity is just a wonderful thing. It is definitely a product of wisdom. So what we had left is page 4, but I want to spend just a moment on the bottom of page 3. This is something that I think everyone in this room has heard before, but there is a practice which is called the 5 remembrances. And what these are, the Buddha told his students to practice by reciting the 5 remembrances every day as a way of letting go of attachment through awareness of impermanence and an equanimous acceptance of what must inevitably come to pass. And so this is right out of the suttas, as said by the Buddha. And this particular translation of it is by Thich Nhat Hanh, and this is one of my favorite ways of reading this one. So it's very beautiful. So the first one is, I am of the nature to grow old. There's no way to escape growing old. And so all of us would agree, yep, that is true.
There's some scientists out there that are trying hard.
Some scientists that are trying hard, some doctors that are trying hard, some makeup artists that are trying hard. One of the interesting things, though, with each of these, it's like these are just truths. These are dhamma. These are truth. And so if you were to look at any one of these and say, well, I'm going to see if I can beat that one, or I'm going to see if maybe that one doesn't apply to me, right away you've got a recipe for suffering. Because, we can take care of ourselves and eat well and exercise and do all these wonderful things, but we're still going to grow old. And there's no way to escape growing old. And in a weird way, maybe it's not a weird way, but I can just share with you from my own personal experience that I practice this. I kind of have like my morning devotions where I go through a series of some of these common texts, and I just read through them, and it's just sort of a way of kind of grounding myself. But I always find these to be really beautiful because it's like in a way, it's understanding that, yeah, I am going to grow old, and that's okay.
It's not doing that.
Oh, I think it just eventually goes to quiet, but it
Oh,
looks like it's
okay.
still
I thought
doing its
maybe
thing.
you're.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you very much, though. I appreciate that. So, I get a real feeling of comfort from it. That, yeah, this is the truth for everybody. So it's not just me, it's all of us. And so we're all going to grow old together. And there's no way to escape growing old. The second, I am of the nature to have ill health. And there's no way to escape having ill health. Again, we take care of ourselves, we eat right, we exercise, we do what we can, but sooner or later the body breaks down. I remember when I was a little bit younger and I had some problems with my hip, that I had a very real sense of feeling betrayed by my body, because I felt like I was young enough that I shouldn't have this physical problem with my hip, at that age. And I really felt betrayed by my body. And there have been other times where I've gotten ill and my reaction to it has been anger, feeling like, doggone it. And so this is another one, eventually we'll all have ill health, and there's no way to escape ill health. Knowing these things, again, this starts to help us cultivate a compassion for one another that's really beautiful and helpful, because we're all experiencing this together. And one of the neatest things is just to know that you're surrounded by people that are going through the same stuff you are. Everybody's going through the same tough stuff in one way or another. I don't know one family that isn't touched by the difficulties of life that we talk about from time to time. The third one, I'm of the nature to die. There's no way to escape death. I hope I live to be, 100 or whatever, as long as I'm healthy, that would be great. But knowing I'm of the nature to die, it creates this spiritual urgency, it's called in the practice. Samvega is the word for it. And what it meant is that, well, if you know you're going to die, you might want to get important things on track before it's too late. And so that's been an important one as well. And then all that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There's no way to escape being separated from them. That's also very true. Relationships begin, and at some point they come to an end, or they change dramatically, or people move away. This one's been helpful to me because my daughter is moving to northern Iraq in about a month. And, so there's change, and she's dear to me, and, so I know there's risk. But, again, accepting this as the truth of life and that everyone else experiences this too, it helps comfort me. And then finally, my actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. So I try to be mindful of that and to perform actions which are not harmful. And I try to perform actions which are as helpful as possible to others. So again, these 5 remembrances, they're really not negative or morbid or sad in any way. They're reminding us, so based on this, make the most out of every encounter with every person. Make the most out of every day that you possibly can. Do what you can to help. And know that your actions are important and that they will certainly outlive us. So, just to review that. And then on to page 4. A great meditation teacher and author, Gil Fronsdal, he describes equanimity this way. It's kind of a neat definition the way he says it. Neither a thought nor an emotion, equanimity is rather the steady, conscious realization of reality's transience. It is the ground for wisdom and freedom and the protector of compassion and love. While some may think of equanimity as dry neutrality or cool aloofness, mature equanimity produces a radiance and warmth of being. The Buddha described a mind filled with equanimity as abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. So I think that's beautiful, and really, to me, that kind of captures the essence of those 5 remembrances. That's kind of the vibe I get out of that. While some may think equanimity is a dry neutrality or a cool aloofness, mature equanimity produces a radiance and warmth of being. So, and then we get into upekkha. Again, upekkha is the word for equanimity. So, upekkha as balance. Now, the Pali word dukkha is usually translated as dis-ease, unsatisfactoriness, stressfulness, and suffering. And it's interesting because the etymology of that word, dukkha, it is of an axle hole in a wheel that is off-center or out of balance, leading to a very rough ride. So you find that du, that prefix du, you find that in the Pali language used for that. Wheels out of balance, axle hole that's not straight. And so if you think about equanimity as being balanced, imagine yourself centered in balance, contemplating things as they are in the present moment. So in other words, you're equanimous. And then a thought comes into the mind about a difficult event from the past. And what happens? Well, you feel remorse or regret or guilt or grief or sadness or lamentation. Not always, but most of the time, thoughts of the past are a cause of suffering. So thoughts of the past are like putting a weight on the outer rim of a wheel that has been turning smoothly. Suddenly that wheel goes out of balance and everything begins to shake and rattle and things get very rough. And to me, that's really the way it feels when I'm balanced and then I start to bring in some of these outside ideas. The same thing happens when we think about the future. We're equanimous in the present moment, and then we think about some terrible thing that might happen, and immediately the balance of the mind is lost. When we notice the mind moving into the past or the future and causing us misery, we must firmly, but with compassion, move the mind back to the present moment. So remember at all times that the present moment is the moment of refuge. I mean, for most of us, the present moment is safe, it's stable, things are going well, there's nothing immediately happening. For most of us, most of the time, that's the way the present moment is. And the things that we think about that might happen in the future, might happen tomorrow. If I start to focus on maybe the danger that my daughter faces over in Iraq, then there's the suffering coming from that. I'm not in the present moment. Or if I think about something that happened in a past relationship that is heartbreaking, well, then my experience of that is now, so I'm dragging past and future into the present moment. So keeping that in mind, to the extent that you're able, stay focused on the present moment. The Buddha says over and over in different teachings, the past is over, it's dead, there's nothing you can do about it. In the future, it's just an idea, it's just a fantasy. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. So spend your time focusing on the present moment. That's the time to work on your relationships with other people, is the present. That's the time to do to perform wholesome actions, that's the time to be kind, and that's the best way to take care of the future. So that concludes the teaching on equanimity. But then what I wanted to do tonight is to kind of dovetail onto that and share some techniques and some other teachings that you might find helpful. We've spent the last few weeks talking about the 10 paramis, and that's been wonderful. But now I want to switch gears a little bit and use a few practical tools. So tonight's handout, noting, insight, and equanimity. We'll kind of stay with that equanimity theme.
I got 2 of these.
Anybody need another one, or anybody not get one? Okie
I
dokie.
got 2.
Thank you very much. And just a reminder, after our classes, I put these out on the table out there, so feel free to take these. They're just extras, so yeah, feel free to take them. Or if you think you know somebody that might benefit from one of them, by all means. Okay, so excuse me, just take some water. So through our normal meditation practice, what we do each week together, when we get together, we do our samatha, and samatha is the body scan, calm abiding. That's what samatha means, calm abiding. And then we do anapanasati, and anapanasati means awareness of respiration. So we do those 2 things. And we've developed the ability to remain focused on a single object to the relative exclusion of all others. So I would venture to guess that most of the people in this room, compared to when you first started to practice breathing meditation and focusing on the triangular area of the nose, my bet is that you have more moments now where you remain focused on that than you did when you first started, right? Most people, they just gradually develop that ability through awareness, noticing when you're distracted, and then gently guiding the mind back to what you want it to focus on, the object of meditation. So when we do this, in a sense, we're training the mind to stay put, again, usually on that triangular area of the nose. And this type of training helps us see that we're not just helpless spectators, subject to whatever the mind wants to think about, but that we can direct the mind toward equanimity, and that makes every area of life more pleasant. One of the interesting things that I've noticed since I've been living in this house, and I live here, I live upstairs, and I'm alone. I'm alone. For the most part when I'm here, unless there's a class. And so it's a very interesting thing after just a sustained period of being alone. And of course, being alone, I'm usually quiet, unless I'm talking to Lucy about something important. But usually I'm quiet. And I really start to notice, you know what? My experience in any given moment is just only what I'm thinking about. That's what it is. I still, make food and do dishes and sweep up and clean up and all those kinds of just normal things that you'd be doing no matter where you lived or what your circumstances were. But what I realize is just the inner working of my mind, the activity of my mind becomes my experience of life. And that I have the ability to redirect my mind to more wholesome ways of thinking, to more wholesome strategies. And that's a really powerful thing to realize. And so solitude has kind of reinforced that for me over the past few months. But it is, there's great that's a real reason to be optimistic, because it's true. You know, what I am is what I think about. In fact, that's the first line of the Dhammapada, probably the most famous text in Buddhism. What we are is a result of what we have thought. That's the first line of that Dhammapada. So that's important. I mean, that's the equivalent of in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. I mean, that the Dhammapada, the Buddhist equivalent of that, is what we are is a result of what we have thought. We are our thoughts. So one issue that all meditators face is what to do with thoughts and distractions when they arise. And we train for this, as you all know, by being objectively aware of what the mind is doing. And when it wanders, we redirect it back to the nose and to the movement and sensations of the breath. And this simple approach is often sufficient. So, most of the time that works. I've had times, and other people I know have had times, where they can be meditating like that, but maybe there's something really, really tough going on in their lives, Maybe they're really suffering from depression or a breakup, or some really terrible thing has happened in their lives. And so they can sit down and meditate, and they can have been, sort of successfully meditating in the way that we meditate, but really it's like the only thing they can think about is this loop over and over of this really tragic, sad thing. So there's times where we need help. We need something stronger. We need something that might help us out of that. So I wanted to share this word kilesas with you. Again, Pali word. Most of them are that I share that are foreign words. It can be very difficult to remain objective and equanimous in the face of thoughts that are particularly troublesome and incessant. So you could just take a breakup with a partner. That's a tough one. Shakes you to your core, is really difficult, is going to change your entire lifestyle, and it's pretty difficult to just get that out of the mind and say, no, I'll focus on, my breath, or I'll focus on these other things. So these troublesome thoughts, they're called kilesas in the canon, the Pali canon. And that word kilesas, it translates as afflictive emotions. And I always like that, because it's talking specifically about these very powerful, difficult emotions that really weigh you down. And it's separating them out from other emotions which are positive, love, joy, compassion, these other very light, pleasant emotions that we can experience. Sometimes we get into these periods where we're just buried in these kilesas, and so these are afflictive emotions. And when we experience them, that experience, the Pali Canon goes on to describe that as mental torment. And I think that's really an accurate way to describe it. When you're caught up in that, that is just mental torment, mental torture. So when we need some additional help to subdue a mind that is plagued by afflictive emotions, we can use a technique called noting. And some of you may be familiar with this, and you may be familiar with it at different levels of practice. But this noting practice, I think it's very helpful. I think it's very helpful, very, very beneficial. And in my experience, most people are able to pick it up and just get very proficient at it almost immediately, because it just kind of comes naturally. So it's not a hard thing to do. So noting is the technique of identifying and then subvocally, meaning you're just thinking rather than saying it, but you're identifying and subvocally noting thoughts and feelings as they arise in the mind during meditation practice. And the notes themselves are short. Usually they're just a word or two, and they're kept fairly general, at least in the beginning. So by noting, we objectify thoughts and emotions so that we can sit with them and observe them without reacting. And I guess maybe I should have said without reacting negatively, because we can observe them, and then we can start to do positive things with them. So just an example. If you're sitting in meditation and your mind is not wanting to cooperate, it's kind of scattered, having a hard time thinking about those difficult things, what you're doing, think of it this way. You're stepping back and objectively, you're making the decision to objectively observe what's going on in your mind and to just kind of put a little label on it. So if you're sitting there and you realize, oh, I'm just thinking, and it's just kind of random thoughts. So you might note that by just saying to yourself, thinking. And you can stay with that, kind of observing the thought. Oftentimes, just a couple of notes like that is enough to kind of derail that thought that you're in. It's kind of amazing how it works. So you might say, thinking. And then you might observe, be with your breath for a few more breaths. If that same thought is still there, you might say, thinking. Odds are, after 2 to 4 notes like that, that thought will have faded away. The interesting thing is, you're observing this, you're realizing, oh, these thoughts are impermanent. There are moments where these thoughts are here, but then they go away. When I've gone through some tough stuff, that was really helpful to me too, because I got a sense of hope from it, because just the fact that I could see that this particular afflictive emotion that I was experiencing, and it was so intense and painful, that it did stop. And then maybe it came back again 2 minutes later, but it stopped. And it was like, as soon as I saw, yes, this works, this practice works, it's like you're driving a wedge into that. And it gets wider and wider and wider. So the other thing that's happening here in terms of like cognitive therapy is that you're not in denial either. You're not like saying, okay, I'm just going to forget all about this, but you're aware of it. I'm thinking. Or maybe it's more like remembering. Maybe you're remembering something somebody said or did that was painful. So you say remembering. And all the while you're trying to bring your awareness back to your breath and stay with that, but you're noting what's going on. Or you might notice that you're starting to react with rage or anger, or feeling sort of an ill will or a hatred building up in your chest, and so you might say reacting. You might watch that for a moment. You might see how that changes when you're bringing your wisdom to it. You might practice letting go, getting back to that place of relative equanimity. Sometimes you might be imagining, or planning. So this noting is often enough to help us remain objective and let go of thoughts, and especially reactions. Now I'll tie it into something. When we do the practice, the body scan practice, and we get to the back, and usually when we're in the back, I start to talk about the common experience of discomfort in the back. Fatigue, pain, unpleasant sensations, things we don't like. And we start to notice that certain things happen around that. When we are disliking sensations or states of consciousness, that there's a closing off. We start to get a real restricted way of thinking. It's like we can't really think past that pain. We can't really think objectively about it, that, oh, this is just pain. But it becomes very personal, very focused, very intense, and very difficult to let go of. And then we start to introduce this expansive awareness to the experience. It's just kind of amazing how that works, to say, okay, this is one small part of my consciousness, but I've got all this awareness. All this awareness. Is it possible that I can just be here and sit here, and yep, there's pain in my back and I don't like it, but I can let that be there and be that way. And at the same time, I can be here practicing peacefulness and equanimity. So it's like you can make peace with the difficulty, and then you find that you're actually starting to be able to let go of the tension around it. And just like tension around pain in the body, there's tension around emotions, afflictive emotions, and kilesas. So this is a way of kind of seeing this and saying, you know, within this great expansive awareness that I have, which has been carefully lined with compassion and loving kindness and appreciative joy and equanimity. I mean, everything we do with our practice, we always kind of come back to that. That's what this is all about. We're creating this very soft, beautiful place of refuge for ourselves based on those 4 Brahma Viharas. So we realize, yeah, you know, I do have this expansive awareness, this great stability, and the capacity to be with whatever comes up, and I'll still be okay. And the things that come up are always impermanent. So right now it might feel like I'm going to have a heartbreak for the next 10 years, but we realize, oh, but there was a minute where I didn't. And then there was a minute where I didn't. And suddenly there's this great confidence and great reassurance that comes from that. So, so sometimes if you're in the real afflictive emotion zone of the practice, it can be helpful to give a little more of a detailed note to some of these emotions. So you might say anger, anger, fear, fear, jealousy, jealousy, sadness, sadness. So you're giving a little more to them, but it's because you're mindfully aware of the emotions that you're experiencing. Now, a couple of important things about noting: remaining objective and equanimous. That's what you're trying to do. And there'll be moments where you can't, but that's what you're trying to do. If you're observing an emotion from the outside, you are not experiencing it from the inside. So this really makes a difference. It's changing your vantage point. Rather than being caught up in the vortex of this very difficult emotion, you are looking at it from outside. You are not experiencing it from the inside. So noting is a little bit like putting a thought or an emotion in quarantine, right? So you know it's still there, but you're kind of setting it here because you know that it can do some damage if it's out. Next important thing to remember, you can remain with the thought or emotion that you're noting until it passes away, and then return to following the breath or whatever you're using as your object of meditation. And this helps you to see the impermanent nature of all thoughts and emotions. And that's another one too that's interesting, because you can think, all I thought about all day long is that argument I had with so-and-so. But when those thoughts come up and you actually decide, okay, let me watch them, let me see how long they last, we experience this thing called anicca in Pali, which means impermanence. It comes, but it goes. And we realize that it's actually not there all the time. So that isn't our complete experience. And then it's helpful to not analyze beyond the note. At this point in time, you're just trying to work with this to maintain this objectivity. And the reason for that is you don't want to feed the thought or emotion by giving it more fuel. So you're not like thinking about it and then saying, yeah, and then she said this, and then I said that, and then she stormed out, all this stuff I'm just making up out of thin air. So it's.
But don't you have to try and understand? Is it greed? Is it, what are those 5 things you talk?
Yes, it is. There's a time and a place for, really getting into that and kind of digging into what happened. But in this case, we're really talking about how can I sort of establish this base of equanimity and balance, which is really the stepping stone, then the platform that will allow you to go into and look at, really, okay, now what are the details here? See, but if you're doing it from a state of mental torment, that can be pretty difficult to get a clear analysis of what the problem was. So, does that make sense?
When I would say just the opposite, I would say you have to get at why you're feeling this. What is that? What are those things? 6 or something.
The 5 hindrances,
yeah,
or
right.
sure.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those.
Sure.
Usually.
Mm-hmm.
So don't you have to try to understand which one it is?
Yes.
Before you can.
Well, I would say it would probably be possible to do it before, but again, what we
Otherwise, aren't you just kind of just ignoring it, putting it under the rug?
Well, you're not ignoring it, because what you're doing is you're aware of, this is the afflictive emotion, this is the thing that's tormenting me. What I'm doing now is working with it in a way, you're not working with it to just push it out of your memory forever, but you're working with it in a way where you can look at it objectively, and this is what really gives us the opportunity to solve the problem, I think, rather than, because otherwise we tend to go into the next conversation with the person with, I'm right and you're wrong and you hurt me and, this kind of thing.
To me, you have to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have to get at what is it that that is.
Mm-hmm. And so, in the
so
noting,
I can accept it.
yeah, in the noting, there's awareness of it. It's like, yep, there's anger here, or there's fear here, or there's, ill will, or whatever it is. So you're aware of it through the noting, but what you're doing is you're setting the stage so that you can go back in and fix this thing with the wisdom mind, as opposed to sort of the reactive mind.
See, I think, yeah, when you're in that emotion, that twisted, down to the noting, that's when that would come in handy.
Yeah.
Just say thinking, and to try to stop the snowball of this and that. I think that it's true, Elaine, what you're saying about having introspection.
Yeah.
But usually when you're at the point of noting, you're sometimes not very objective about the introspection at that time. That's what I'm gathering.
And you're really both right, because both of these things come together to ultimately solve the problem. But in a way, it's like, sometimes I use that example of if you go to the doctor and let's just say you've got this terrible pain in your belly and you're really worried about it, and you're crying from the pain and you're upset and you're scared. And you go into your doctor and your doctor just takes on all those same emotions. Now she's crying, she's scared, she's panicking, what we want is our doctor to be objective, because we know that with that objective mind that she is going to be rational, she's going to be clear-headed, and she's going to come up with the right diagnosis or the right solution. So then the right diagnosis or the right solution can take place. So we're really kind of on the same page. It's just establishing this equanimity as a base, or kind of a safe place from which to dig into the deeper issues and probably solve them.
Also, aren't you just referring right at this point in time to emotions, things that are coming up while you're meditating?
Mm-hmm.
So that's different. He's talking about while you're meditating, if all of a sudden a thought comes to your mind, you're just thinking anger. Okay, let's put it down for now.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're meditating, you're trying to narrow your thought processes.
Right.
And so I think what she's talking about other times,
Right.
other situations.
But odds are, if it's a big enough issue, it'll probably come up during meditation, and you'll be thinking about it.
And again. So
Yeah, again and again and again. Yeah. So really, yeah, the idea is not to just put it on the back burner and not address it, but the idea is, okay, this is important to me because it's an afflictive emotion. It's been tormenting me, and so I want to solve this problem. But I really can't do that when I'm in panic mode, or I can't do it when I'm in so much emotional pain that I'm just, crying or whatever the case may be. So this is a way of enabling ourselves to look at this with some objectivity, and then to be able to go in and start to solve the problem. Because sometimes if we go in without the objectivity and the equanimity, we make things worse. Like I had, have you ever typed out an email to somebody and made the very wisdom-based decision to just let it sit in your draft for 24 hours before you send it to somebody, and then you look at it and you think, I probably don't need to send it. In some ways it's kind of like that. I mean, I've done that where it's like, I don't know if here's what I'm thinking right now, and then show it to a friend. What do you think? And they'll say, I don't think you should send that. So, in a way, it's a little bit like that. But, well, we should end it here. We're at the end of our time, and we'll pick up on this next week. But maybe,
I have a question.
yeah,
Does noting work for earworms?
for earworms?
When you get a song in your head and you can't get it.
Oh.
It's like,
If you're in the grocery store and you don't know, you realize you're listening to something, and then you get home, it's like, look at that stupid song coming
Oh,
in my head.
yeah.
I hate that song.
Yeah, that might be a good time to try and chant the 5 remembrances from memory. That might be enough
what in the heck are you talking
to
about?
derail it.
You didn't know that?
No.
I guess that's a good.
I didn't know it was called that.
All right.
Well, I learned something new. Well, I've learned quite a few things.
I-
That's one of them.
I do know every time I walk into a Walmart that whatever song is on, it's like, I just can't take
See, I
it.
don't even hear them.
Well, yeah, but sometimes you're not, but then you get home and
Yeah,
it says,
then you
where
hear
did that
all
come
those.
from? I
Yeah.
hate that song.
Like,
Yeah,
why am I singing that
Where-
song?
yeah, right.
That's right. Well, let's take 1 minute before we leave. We'll do our 4 Brahma Viharas practice, and this is always the right medicine in every single situation. This is always the right medicine, and we've had some pretty tragic and sad stuff that has happened in our country and around the world recently, and so this is the right medicine, the right medicine. So may all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. We want all beings to be well. And we want all beings to be surrounded by love and kindness, real love and kindness. Imagine the transformation in this world if all beings were surrounded by love and kindness. And may all beings be joyful. May all beings be joyful. And may we experience their joy as just as good as our own, just as important, just as happiness creating for us as it is for them. And then may all beings be equanimous, free, peaceful, not at a point where they're craving or filled with aversion or anger or ill will. And then may all of you sharing the space with me tonight, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I appreciate you so much. May you all be truly, truly happy. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you.
I'm still learning how to play this
Oh, I love the sound of it.
ginormous bell.
I
It's
love
yeah, it is. It's a neat sound. I can feel it vibrating the
Yeah.
floor all around me when I sound it too. So, well, yep. Thanks everybody for your comments and questions.